All right, friends, welcome to the beginning of our Python course. It is week one, lecture one. Really excited. I love Python. It's actually my favorite language to teach, my favorite language to write in. So really excited that I get to do this with you guys and alongside of you. A little bit of an introduction. My name is Will. I've been with Coding Dojo on and off for the last like 3 years. In some capacity, I've been here. So not on and off. In some capacity, I've been here. I've taught as an instructor, which is what I do here. I've taught our data science program, really utilizing Python and other tools for data science and machine learning. I was our Azure specialist, which is like our cloud specialist. So I've worked with Coding Dojo and Microsoft to make sure that we are giving students correct um, information and training on the cloud. I have been lucky enough to be guest instructors at Microsoft to go teach about the two languages called Rust and Go. So I love development. Um, I've also not worked at Coding Dojo. I've worked at a couple different other companies and different, sort of positions. I've worked as a customer success engineer, which is like post-sales implementation of a product. Really, companies would come to us and say, hey, I'm using your tool. It's not working the way that I was expecting it. They would give us their code and we'd walk through and say, this is how you need to change your code. Really like a code review, really. And then I've been a developer for the last couple of years. So lots and lots of different areas, lots of different hats within tech, but it's been a really fun space. I love Python. I also teach, I teach all of our languages, but really love Python. This is my favorite one. And this program, actually, I launched the Flask material ages ago. Back when it first came out, I was the person who sort of spearheaded it. So really fun. The languages change and grow, but end up really loving Python. Cool. I'm located in Seattle. If you guys want to put maybe your name and where you're located in the chat, that'd be super helpful and fun. I'm sure you guys know each other, but I don't know you yet. So it'd be great to do that. I'm located in the Seattle area. I've got a wife and two pups. One of my dogs, though, just as a heads up, does have epilepsy. It very rarely happens, but sometimes she does have a seizure. She's okay if she does. She's very okay. But on the off chance it does happen, especially we're together for quite a long time, so it may happen. If that does happen, then I will just pause class. Hopefully, I can pause the recording, but I'll go tend to her. It takes about 5 minutes, and then I'll come back, and she'll be good as she'll be okay. So, just wanted to give you guys a fair warning on that. Cool. I see a couple things in chat. I got Georgia, Miami. I know San Antonio's in there. So really awesome. All over, which is great. Continuing to market and to get to network with your friends and your classmates really will help in the job search and job area. So it'll be really fun. Cool. We'll move forward. Are there there's a couple things just with the class overview. You guys, this isn't your first stack at Coding Dojo, so you're likely very familiar with all of this, but always want to just make sure that I'm doing my due diligence and, kind of making sure everything is taken care of. There's a couple of really key things. There's really only like 3 things to think through. One of them is going to be our class calendar. So if we come here, you guys all should have gotten an email from me this morning that had all of the stuff. I do apologize for it being a little bit late. There's been some shifting with instructors in Coding Dojo here. So sorry about that a little bit. But yeah, so you should have all gotten an email from me. If you didn't, please check your, I would assume so, because you're here and you had the lecture link. But if you didn't, please check your junk, kind of file to see if, or junk folder to see if it's in there. But it was just a welcome email, gives you access to everything you need. There's also that access in different areas, and I'll point it out. But here's our class calendar. You can kind of look at it. Makes a lot of sense. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we will be having class. At 4 o'clock, I will be here with an office hour. This is an optional time for you guys to come. I mean, obviously, they're both optional. This is time where you guys can come and ask questions, hang out. I don't do a ton within office hours, especially for this first one on Tuesdays, because I really want this to be a time that if you guys are coming, you have dedicated time with me. That way you guys can ask questions, get some help, get some insight on things that you're asking, things that you're needing, things that you're doing. And then after that, we'll have our lecture. Thursdays are going to look a little bit different. We're going to have our office hour, and then sometimes we'll have a career services assembly. We will not. We'll just have this as class for this Thursday. But what this will do on Thursdays is we'll actually have an algorithm that we're going to work through. Probably about 30 minutes. What we'll probably do is do the first 30 minutes of class. We'll do office hour. If you guys have questions, come and ask them. And then at 4:30 PST, these are all in Pacific Standard Time. At 4:30, we will start our algorithm. Now, if the majority of the class can't make it till 5, we can obviously shift that. So if that's the case, just shoot me a direct message and say the earliest you can come, and I can kind of plan my schedule around that. But we'll start with an algorithm. I'll explain the algorithm, put you guys in groups, or kind of give you some time, groups of 2 or groups of 3, however many are here, to kind of walk through that algorithm. Maybe we do it together and just build it together because it's quite a small class. And then we'll walk through at the end how we can build that out. And if there's anything I want to add on or anything I missed on Tuesday, that'll be at the end of that class. And if not, then it'll be another just dedicated time for you guys to ask questions, really get some help here. One thing I want to make you aware of, and I will notate it on I'll notate it here, is this day, Monday the 15th, is a holiday for Coding Dojo. So that is Martin Luther King Day. So there's not going to be any TA help, and I will not be working. So if you guys are needing help, just be aware. And I'll make sure that I notate that after class today. But just to give you guys a little bit of an insight of what we're doing, today we're just talking about Intro to Python, part 1. A lot of you guys are either retaking or you're coming from Web Fundamentals. So if you're coming from Web Fundamentals, what today is going to show you is, maybe here's how we did it in JavaScript, or we'll talk about how you did it in JavaScript. I'll show you how to do it in Python. Basic things. So declaring variables, for loops, dealing with something we call lists, which is really just an array, and kind of showing you how Python works. It's really, really easy. Really a lot easier than JavaScript in a lot of ways. So I think you're going to sit and say, wow, this is awesome. This is really, really cool. Next week, we're going to continue that. We're going to look a little bit more in depth. We're going to look at dictionaries. We're going to start really starting to understand Python, where we can talk about nested dictionaries, nested loops, iterating through those. And then on week 3, we're going to introduce something called OOP, which is object-oriented programming. That's going to be sort of the crux of that. It's going to be a big, big topic for us to understand, make sure that we really, really know what OOP is. And it's because that's a paradigm that's throughout development, not just Python, but that is something that basically companies will pair or sort of blueprint their code base in an OOP way. So we want to make sure that you know that, because this information is going to be applicable to multiple languages, not just Python. So it's going to be a really fun one. Then we'll just continue to do that. We'll jump into database design. So we'll understand MySQL. We're going to use what we call a relational database. We're going to learn all about that in week 4. We'll design our first database. Then we're going to continue with that. We're going to learn how to query a database. So we're not only going to design it and build it, we're going to learn how to go and retrieve information from it or do some sort of functionality from it. And then we'll introduce Flask. Flask is a micro framework that we put on top of Python itself to kind of dictate how our code runs. It has a couple different helper tools in order for us to do things more efficiently and also not have to build everything from scratch. So it's quite nice in that regard. And then that'll just continue as we're jumping into Flask. We're going to understand how we're really putting everything together. We're going to really build our full stack application, because we're going to have our knowledge of our databases and we're going to have our knowledge of Flask. And we're going to put that all together in week 9, sorry. And we're going to begin our CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete. Really the basis of that, dealing with the relationships with our databases and our data. And then we will get all the way up to week 15, and that's when our belt exam is going to be open. So after week 14, we will give you, if you meet certain criteria, it's 90% of core assignments. You have to be okay with discussion questions. Then we will give you the exam and you can open that up and start trying for the exam. And then obviously a passing exam grade gets you into projects and algorithms. So we got 16 weeks of fun, 16 weeks of learning about Python, going in depth about Python. So it's going to be a really, really fun course. One other thing just to note is you do have one discussion question per week that is due. Remember that these are necessary, and in order for you to pass, they have to be done. If you do fall behind, let's say on a core, like your core assignments, if you reach out to me and let me know, I can communicate that over to Clayton, your success manager, and then they can, at least be aware and we can have a knowledge. If you need an extra day or two, just reach out to me and I can try to extend that. Discussion questions are a lot harder. They're a lot harder for me to, and I really can't unless there's some sort of crazy circumstance. I can't really extend those. So please make sure you go do those. They should be open. I believe the first at least 4 weeks are already open. So if you have 10 minutes, go knock those out. You don't have to worry about it for 4 weeks, which should be really, really nice. Cool. Are there any, also just a couple more things. At this class sheet, you can find our lecture Zoom link. You can find up if you need to set up a one-on-one with me, then you can. The only thing I ask is if you are in the moment where you're stressed out and you're trying to figure out something, there's a couple different things you should do, right? First off, you should take 20 minutes, make sure you are trying to problem solve and figure that out. After that, you should post in Discord, post in our class, which we're going to get to in a bit, asking your question. Then after that, if it's another 20 minutes, then you can go to a place called Dojo Hall, which I need to update the link there. Go to Dojo Hall, update that link. And then a TA can help you. And then after that, if you're still just needing to talk through it, you're still really not understanding it, or you want to talk through career stuff, that's when you would set up a one-on-one with me. Sometimes students panic and set up a one-on-one, and then all of a sudden, solve it the next day, or whatever, and the one-on-one's in 3 days or it's next week. And I'm simultaneously doing 2 different classes. And so if you take up time on my calendar, then that can prevent, that's not needed. That can prevent another student who does need that time because they're really not understanding or they have questions from booking. So I just ask that you follow the process. That does not mean I don't want to meet with you. I would love to meet with all of you, just to really get that understanding and to help you guys in any way. So if you need it, please use it as a resource. But I ask that you exhaust other tools before just jumping in straight to that. Don't let that be your first and only thing. Okay, are there any questions on the course calendar? I like to, just as a little pulse check, if you guys put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense, put a 0 if you're confused. Just a little bit of binary, 1 to 0. Cool. Okay, great. We also have a class Discord. You guys should all be in that. That should look just like this. If you're not in this, you need to let me know fairly soon. By fairly soon, I mean immediately. You should see this. I see a lot more stuff than you do. So if you're like, oh, I don't see all that, that's okay. The one that really matters is should be this cohort will Python Flex. That one is the important one to be in. So I sent a message today, and I pinned some important links there. So please make sure, if you guys are able to, if you can right now, go in and just comment, hey, I'm seeing this. That'll be really helpful. But just wanted to show you there's a couple things that we do or we have. First and foremost, our class sheet, which is my favorite thing, the thing we just walked through. I think it's kind of our one-stop shop. That is up here, that class calendar. You can also put it right here. So if as we continue to go through in Discord, this message is going to kind of, be at the very top. It's going to be way too long, but you can always just click right here and it's there. The other way to access important links is to click this pin right here. This pin will bring up this message that's pinned. That should be your big, kind of your big 3 for links: your class calendar, your Zoom link, and your Calendly if you need with me. But yeah, do me a favor, just write your name, say I'm seeing this or doing something of that nature in here. That would be really, really great. And then we've already talked about the class schedule. We've walked through kind of what to expect. I would say a lot of instructors love Discord. I'm not the best at Discord in regards of obviously I check it every day, but it's not my kind of ping. I don't have notifications on because I get access to all of these, so I would get pinged 24/7. So I would say the best and most and the easiest way to get a hold of me is to shoot me an email because I have that on my phone. I check my email probably way too much. It's an unhealthy check. So if you do have, thanks Joshua for doing that. I appreciate it. If you do have a question, if you need something, if you can't make, can't do something, or you just need anything from me, email is going to absolutely be the easiest thing for me to see versus Discord oftentimes, because it can hide if we're not friends and it's a whole thing. So please, please, please shoot for email. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Okay. Any questions on tools, on resources that we have at our disposal before we spend the next, kind of 40-ish minutes jumping into class and writing code? Any questions here?
Hey, I do have a question.
Yeah, hit me with it.
Um, I was wondering, I'm one of the people that is doing a retake right now,
Mhm.
and I had a few errors on my exam,
Uh-huh.
and I just wanted to know, I know it's like early, but I would like to schedule a one-on-one to go over those things. Is that cool? Would that be fine? Even though I know it's
Yeah,
early.
that shouldn't be a problem. I would probably say because I didn't grade it, if you shoot me an email, Joshua, I can go in and see who graded it. It's probably Robert or who was it Melissa?
It was Melissa. Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, because Melissa graded it. I might just try to connect you with Melissa, just so she can walk through what you missed, and if there's like, okay, well, I don't understand how this works, and it's a topic, then yeah, maybe we can jump in and meet. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get what you're saying.
yeah, and I'm sure Melissa would love to meet. She's great. So I'll reach out to her. If you shoot me an email tomorrow, I can, or email
Okay,
today, I can reach out to her.
cool. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure. Any other questions? Okay. Well, let's jump in then, friends. A little bit of an introduction to Python. Again, it's my favorite language. It is used all over. It is one of the most popular, no matter uh, what sort of way that you look into what's the most popular, whether it's through Stack Overflow or it's through GitHub and which code was written in the most, or any sort of developer voting system. Python is always within sort of the top three. It's usually Python and JavaScript, and then whatever's cool at the time. But Python is used everywhere. That's why I love it so much. You can do so much with it. You can build web applications, like Instagram is built with Python. You could do machine learning and AI and machine learning. Python that's the language that you do all that in. Um, you can do data visualizations, data science. You can do statistics within Python. It's really a powerful language because you can build web applications or mobile applications. You can build video games, and you can build like AI and data science sort of applications or structures. And so it's a really, 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 really versatile language. So if you just know this, you really open up yourself to lots of different opportunities. That's why Coding Dojo chose Python for the Flex program, because it's really the most versatile. You can open yourself up to many, many avenues there. Um, Python is just what we call an interpreted language. So if you guys are at all familiar with JavaScript, Python works very, very similar. Does anybody know what an interpreted language means? Does anybody know what that word means? Interpreted. Okay. What that means is as Python, as you run the code, it reads it and interprets it line by line, right? So we're going to see when we're declaring variables, we don't have to say what type it is. We don't have to project and say, this is what I'm expecting to get back from this. Python just reads it, and as it reads it, it sort of says, okay, well, they must mean a string, or they must mean a number or Boolean. We're going to get to that here in a second. And so it interprets as it reads it. Now, there's some pros and some cons with that. Some pros is it's really easy to write, right? You have way less work up front. It's really, really easy. Python is known as sort of the best language for anybody learning how to write full stack applications because it's so much easier to read, write, understand. It's very close to just English. And so it's really, really easy to write and really easy to understand. Some of the downfalls of that, though, is because it has to take the time to interpret, it's a little bit slower. So you'll always hear Python's a little bit slow. Python was created by a guy named Guido van Rossum. Microsoft has recently hired him to try to make it faster. And so it is a little bit slow. And then also with an interpreted language versus what we call a compiled language. Interpreted language, if there's an error, it doesn't know that there's an error until it gets that line, right? We didn't do any sort of pre-checks. We didn't make sure, okay, everything's good before we run the code. We're just sort of running the code and while it's running, we're like, oh, there's an error. It doesn't really work. Compared to what we call a compiled language, which would be like a Java or a C#. Those are ones where you have to be really strictly typed, where you have to declare, okay, this variable is a string. And then before you can even run the code, you have to do what we call compile it. Computer goes in and checks and says, is there going to be any errors? And you can't really run it until it's gone through and checked, okay, everything's good to go. So that's what makes compiled languages a little bit faster. But Python, again, because the ease of use, because it's easier to understand, you can write a lot of scripting. So in my day-to-day, I've written a ton of scripts just like to automate things and to do things within Python. It's great for IoT development as well, which is like Internet of Things. If you have any device that you want to embed with the internet, it's great for that. Computer vision, it's awesome. And so that's really the why, right? Is Python is one of the most used languages. It's one of the most versatile. You can do totally different things. You can go into data science. You can go into a whole bunch of different stuff with using Python. So that's why I love it. I love, love, love Python. Cool. So how do we create a Python file? How do we get started there? Well, all we do is if we're in our VS Code, what we're going to do is we're going to come here and we're going to press this little plus button. I've already done that. And then we're going to type. One thing to note is, I'm going to call this class 1, is everything in Python is lowercase. Everything in Python is lowercase. And then if you have 2 words, Python does not like spaces. You'll see it in a little bit. It's just not a space thing. We're going to talk about that when we get to code blocks. So when you are trying to delineate the difference between 2 words, right? In JavaScript, what we did is we just did something like this, right? Where we had our camel case. Now this will still technically work. So this is just semantic stuff. It's not really going to like break your code in this regard. What will break your code is if you have a space, but we use an underscore to separate our words. This is a great way to sort of remember it. This is what we call snake case. Snake case. So you can sort of think of the way I attach, it's snake case and it's Python, right? Python's a snake, it uses snake case, easy peasy. And so if we're doing and this is the same thing with variables as well. We have variables with multiple names. We're going to use snake case to delineate between the 2 words. And so if we are doing this, if we're creating that, we're creating our file. It's just class_1.py. We can do that here. Cool. Now we've created our file, and I want to talk a little bit about syntax. We've already talked about the interpreter. That's what kind of within that. Talk a little bit about syntax. We're going to create a variable. Now, before we do anything, I'm going to write a comment. In JavaScript, we did this. In HTML, I think we did like there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do. But in Python, all we do is the pound sign. The pound sign delineates and says, okay, this is a comment. What a comment really does is as the computer is going and reading through, it just skips whatever is commented out, right? The computer does not read that. So I'm gonna say variable. One thing I do also want to point out is I use something called GitHub Copilot. Copilot will basically finish code for you. It can write code for me. It's really, really cool tool. I use that for my day to day. And I also do it because I'm going to be honest, I am a terrible speller. And so I will often misspell stuff. And so it will often just write it for me. And what the nice part about it is, you know, we've all probably been in the class where you guys have seen the instructor make the error. The instructor hasn't seen it. So you're kind of sitting there and you're focusing on the error and you're like, that's not going to run. And that doesn't run. And then they're like, why isn't this running? This sort of gets around that. If it becomes a distraction, please let me know and I can absolutely turn it off. It's really, really simple and easy. One thing I would also say is I would encourage you guys not to use it only because I know what it's supposed to say and it's not perfect, right? GitHub Copilot can still mess up. Same thing with Code Whisperer, which is AWS, and Bard, which is Google. They can still mess up, but because I understand the language, I can say, oh, that's not what we wanted. If you don't, A is going to take away from your learning, and then B, you could get in a really, I've seen students get in really bad spots because they just used Copilot and said, yep, do this code, and it wasn't what they needed, and it was broken, but they didn't know how to work it. It was a whole thing. So yeah. So that's why if you see that it's trying to auto-populate, that's what it is. Cool. So in JavaScript, what we did is we would say var, and then we'll say x equals 3. And you can see that it already does not like that, right? It's already kind of going over this. If you're wanting to see sort of this stuff, we can look and see that it's Pylance. Pylance is an extension, so you can just go to Pylance. And it's a Microsoft extension that I would encourage you guys to absolutely download because it just helps you make sure that your Python code is set up in a good way. Usually the way to say, okay, which one do I want to use? Is this one that is good for me to use? Is always look at the downloads. There's lots of extensions out there, especially and on VS Code. But anything that's got like, you know, 82 downloads, probably not ideal. Something like 80 million. Okay, cool. It's a legitimate tool that people use. So that's always, so like 100,000, Photo 3 is actually a cool tool, but yeah, want to make sure. Oh, so this is 108 million. So this is the Python as well. So I would download this. I believe this now becomes Pylance. I think they just packaged it all up. Yeah. Yeah, they did. Cool. Cool. Yeah. So you could also download this one, just Python from Microsoft, 108 million, and that'll help you. It'll help you just kind of run, debug, a bunch of cool different tools there. But you can see that this is already not liking it. That's because with Python, we don't have to write this word var. We just say x equals 3. Now, there's a couple things going on here, right? Because Python's an interpreted language, it skips this. If we were to run this code, it skips this line because it's a comment. It gets here and it says x equals 3. And it says, oh, we don't need that either. It says, oh, okay, they must be declaring, I'm interpreting that they're declaring a variable here, right? I'm interpreting that they're declaring a variable. Now, that's really easy. It's really quick for us to write. One thing to be cautious of, though, is if I come down here and I say x equals 4, it interprets that you're redeclaring this variable. And so it's really easy to rewrite or overwrite your variable. So just be cautious of that. In JavaScript, sorry, we had tools like let, or we had tools like const that determined, okay, yeah, you can't redeclare it or whatever, you can redeclare it. We don't have that. It's like the Wild West in Python. All you do is you just write your variable name equals, and then its value, and it will do the rest, right? Again, makes it really fast, but it makes it a way that you can kind of mess up pretty easily. But let's say that we wanted to see this. If I want to see this, instead of saying console log, I just say print. I just say print. And now I can actually run this file. There's a couple different ways I can do that. I'm going to go to terminal. So you're going to click up here make sure you're on VS Code. Click up here and say terminal, new terminal. And so here I'm in lecture 1, right? What I want to do is I want to say Python. Now, if you are a Windows user, you just have to say Python, or I think you can even just say Py. And then you can say class1.py. And this will run your file. Now, if you are a Mac user, you have to say Python 3. You have to say Python 3. So I click that, and then we get 3, right? That's what X was, and it prints it. The reason for Mac that you have to do that is because Python 2.2, I believe it is, comes default on your Mac computer. And so if you just say Python, it's going to use Python 2. And there's some features of Python 3 that have become the norm. Python 3 is out and abundant. Nobody uses Python 2 that we're going to need to have. So you always want to say Python 3. But if you're Windows, you're chilling, because as you downloaded Python, it already created that whole thing for you, the environment variable for you. Cool. So we've seen not only how to declare a variable, but we've now seen how to sort of print a variable if we want to see and visualize. Now, I can just say things like print 2 + 2, and it will allow that to happen. Let me comment this out. The way that I can comment out a lot of stuff is I can either highlight it if I want a couple things, or if I just want one, I can be on the line. And then I do command ? or control ? And that's going to automatically comment out stuff. But like here, if I come here, I can do multiple at the same time, and it will automatically comment. Just a little shortcut for you. I'm going to pause here, or I'm going to run this. I can type it again, or if I just press up on my arrow keys, you see that it has what I most recently did, right? So just another little hack for you. Just press up, and then now we get 4. So within my print statement, I can do some arithmetic if I want. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions on sort of the file naming structure, declaring a variable? We're going to get into the variable types and a whole bunch of stuff there, but any questions right now?
Not yet.
Cool. Awesome. Is this making sense to you guys?
Yes, it
Pretty-
does.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty simple, especially if there's a couple of retakers. You guys probably are aware of how to declare a variable. Okay. Within variables, we have something called a primitive. Primitive data types and composite data types. Primitive data types, there's 3 of them. There's int. There's kind of 3 main things, and then we'll kind of get to it. Okay. These 2 are what we would call numbers. Right here. And I'm just gonna tab that over a bit. And then this is a Boolean and what we call a string. So within numbers, we have what we call an int, right? And that's just what we have, right? That is a whole number. So I could just say sum int equals 5. That is what we just call an integer, just called an integer, right? That we're saying, okay, this is just a numerical value. Now, if I were to do something like this, some float, and it's 5.5, float is what we refer to when we're talking about a decimal. When we have a decimal number, it's known as a float. When we have an integer, it's known as an int. And there's a third one, it's an imaginary number, but you're never going to do that. You're never going to deal with that, so we don't really worry about it. But I can do things like I can say some int plus some float. Maybe I just wrap this whole thing in a print statement. And then if I run this, I get 10.5. If I run this, I get 10.5. Now, you might ask yourself, because if you guys have dealt at all in code, you might say, well, how come usually I can't add a string and a number together because they're 2 different types. So why can I do this? Does anybody know the answer to that question?
Because they're number related versus, I guess, word.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, right? Because they're under the number class, they are able to kind of do this, and Python does some really creative things under the hood. So if I were to say print sum combo, that's just my sum int plus my sum float, we'll see the same thing, right? 10.5. But what I can also do is I can say type. Anybody know what data type this combination is going to come out as? Anybody have any guesses? I think it's going to be int or float.
I was thinking it was just gonna combine them just because they both started with some.
So this is just our variable name, right? So I could put this as unicorn and cupcake.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this could be, these are just our variable names. Anybody else have a guess? What type, the value, the combination when this happens? What is this variable? What type it's going to be? Let's check. So here we have this, we run it. And you see that it's a class float. What it will do under the hood, because it's two numbers, right? It'll say, okay, you're trying to combine an integer to a float. What it does is it actually converts this to 5.0. It converts that and says, okay, because it can't make it doesn't like round up or round down, right? And so it says, well, I cannot make this an integer because I don't want to do that. I don't know if they want me to do that. But what I can do is make this integer into a float, adding a 0.0. So it creates this as a float or converts it into it just for this functionality. Like if I left it here, it's still, if I were to say print type of some int, you'll see that it's still an integer. So we have float and int. So it doesn't change the value here, but for this sake, it says, okay, instead of an integer, I'm just going to change that to a float. And then the value that we get out of that is a float. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Yeah, this might be a simple question, but so when you put that type in parentheses, it literally just gives you the data type of that variable. It's not going to give you that variable.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Just saying type says, okay, what class basically does this belong to? This is going to be a really popular thing whenever we're starting to concatenate and with strings. If we're getting an error, like, oh man, I'm thought it was, an object. I thought it's a dictionary, and it's like, nope, it's a tuple, and we can use the type to really problem solve. That's going to be a great tool for problem solving. But yeah, that's all it does, is it doesn't tell you the value. It just says, okay, when I'm reading it as a int or as a float.
Ooh, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Cool. Anybody have any other questions on numbers? You can do all kinds of stuff with numbers. We're going to do very basic stuff, but you can do quite a bit with it. Any questions on that? Put a 1 in the chat if this is all making sense. Put a 0 if you're confused, or somewhere in between if you need. Cool. The next type is one of my favorites just because I like the way it sounds, and this is a bool or boolean. Anybody know what a boolean is? Can anybody remember?
True or false?
Yeah, exactly. So some bool is just true or false. Now, if you're coming from JavaScript, then true is lowercase t. Here in Python, it's always uppercase. Same thing with Same thing with false. It's an uppercase false. So anytime you're dealing with true or false, it's always capital T and capital F, compared to JavaScript, it's lowercase t, lowercase f. But it just is our true or false. Again, really going to come in handy when we're dealing with conditional statements. That's really where Booleans shine. But yeah, it's just our true or false. And then the third one is we just have our strings. And so I can have something like this, right? Let me comment these out so that we don't. Cool. We have this string called hello world. Usually whenever you're writing in a new language for the first time, hello world is the first thing that you're always going to write in. For some reason, that was the first thing that was written, so that's what we write in. But again, we're still declaring. You see that the way I declare a variable is always the same, whether it's a Boolean, an integer, a float, integer, float, a Boolean, or string. All we do is we put the variable name, and then we put the value here. Now, Python interprets this in these different ways. When Python sees, okay, they're creating a variable, we have the singular equals. That means they're declaring a variable or declaring a value. And then if it's just a number without a period, it's going to say, okay, I'm interpreting this as an int. If it's a number with a period, it interprets it as a float. If it's a Boolean, it uses the capital T true or the capital F false. Those are keywords to say, okay, I'm interpreting this is a Boolean. And the last thing with a string is it interprets it with these quotation marks here. Now you can use single quotes or double quotes. Both are going to be fine. I would encourage you to use the practice of just doing double quotes because, so if I were to say some other string equals single quote, hello from Will's world, you can see it messes up, right? Because what happens is if I've got a apostrophe in my sentence at all, Python interprets this as my string. It says, okay, some other string is just hello from Will, not this portion here. And so what we could do is you could either do an escape character, which kind of beyond what we need to do, or if I just have this in double quotes, it automatically works. And this is not closing it. So I would encourage you guys to do double quotes because that just helps alleviate any of the sort of built-in errors and issues there. Strings can do quite a bit. Now, again, if I were to say print type of some string, we're going to get a string class. I saved it. We run it. Cool. We get class string. Does anybody know what that means? What does class string mean? This is probably in advance, but any of my retakers, what is a class?
Is it an object?
Yeah, exactly. Class is an object, and it's just basically a blueprint, right, for how something operates and how something works. We're going to get to classes in like week 3 or week 4, so don't, if you've never dealt with them before, but just know that a class allows us to say this is how a string operates. And with that, we have some methods that we have access to, right? Really, it's functionality. What can it do? What can this specific class do? And so when we're dealing with that,
Quick question.
different classes have different methods, right? Or different tools that we can do. Like numbers have different things than strings. And so one thing I can do is I can say print len. So in JavaScript, we just said .length, but here all we say is len. And len is a built-in method of my string class, right? It's built-in method of my string class. And that will return the length of my string. Now just know that length does include a space here. But if I come here, I say my save, got to make sure that the white dot's not there anymore. And it gives me 11, right? Because it says hello, which is what, 5 plus world is 5. And then we have 1 for my space, which gives me 11. So it counts all the characters and the length of my string, how long my string is. There's some other things that strings can do as well. That we can do. Let's say that I wanted to say something like this. Cool. Say Will says hello world. I wanted to say Will says hello world. Well, what I could do is I can print and do what we call string concatenation. So let me write that out. So that way in the I could say print some other string. plus, and then it, space, and then some string. So we'll run this. And if you're dealing with your terminal, go up here. Make this a little bit bigger for you guys. And you have a lot of stuff going on. You just have to type clear. And it'll kind of get rid of it. It doesn't get rid of your terminal. Like if you scroll up, it'll still be there. Once we run this, scroll up, it'll still be there, but it kind of gets rid of it. So it doesn't feel so cluttered. So if I run this, I can still, it says, Will says, hello world. Now what this is doing is in the same way that we're adding our two numbers together, 5 and 5.5, it's just adding two strings together. Because of the same class, they can do that. If one was a number and one was a string, it's not going to know what to do or how to do that. But with string concatenation, you see that we have to think through a couple of the things, right? We have this, some other string, Will says, and we see that there's no space here. So if I would have just said this, and I said this, we could see that, there's no space right there. And so I could either, put a space here or put a space here. That becomes kind of a lot, right? Because now I have to go and figure out where my string and sort of format that way. So what Copilot did, is it just added the space there. Another way we could do this is what we call string interpolation. It's what we call an F string. So this is where at the beginning I said that if you're using Python, you have to use Python 3, or if you're using a Mac, you need to use Python 3 versus Python 2. It's because I think it's in 3.6 or 3.4. This idea of string interpolation was introduced, and it's going to save you. But instead of having to say something like this and add in, let's say we had multiple things we wanted to add, what I can do is I can say print. And then all I do is I put an F here in front of my quotations. Again, these are still double quotes. Nothing's changed there, but I put an F. That's what we call our F string. I'm going to call this F string. And then I can inject my variable wherever I want to go. Right? I can inject it. And the way I do that is I do my curly brackets and my variable name. And now what's nice about that is if I wanted to add an exclamation point, I could do that here. I could add in and I can change things. Like I can say, Will says, hello world. I hope you get to eat some combo pieces of cake. Awesome, right? So now, because I'm doing this, I am able to inject these two strings. I hope you get to eat some combo. So it's referring to this combo up here. So 10.5 pieces of cake. So when I run this, I get to have that. Will says, hello world. I hope you get to eat 10.5 pieces of cake. Now, if I didn't do this string interpolation, if I didn't do that, this, because this is a number, is going to give me some fits, right? I'm going to have to change it. Where the way we would do that is I would say print, and then I would say Will says exactly this, just like this, right? Will says, but I could put some other string plus. So instead of doing that, I'll finish this. Perfect. It's a some other string. Let me change this. Plus some string, plus this exclamation. I hope you get to eat, plus, and you see that because some combo is actually of type float, right? We have to readjust it without string interpolation. I have to readjust it to the correct type because strings can only add to strings, right? In the same way that numbers and strings cannot add to one another. And I cannot add 5 plus pizza. That does not make sense, right? Python's going to say, I don't know what that means. So when we're doing this, if we just do just strict string concatenation, what happens is we can do that, but then we have to do what we call typecast, right? We have to change the type of the value within this instance. And the way I can do that with a string is I say str, or I could say int to float. And so I'm changing this 5.5, which is or 10.5, to type string. And so now it's concatenating and adding that together. So if I were to do this, and I come up, I still get that, right? I haven't actually put the C. Oh, wait. So if I come here, I still get the right answer. I still get the same thing, but you can see that this was a lot of work. Plus, actually, I have this issue right here. So I'd have to do plus. So it'd have to be like that. So instead of doing something like this, and you can see how complicated that gets, we could just do string interpolation, use an F string, and then make it much, much, much easier on ourselves. Okay. I did quite a bit. I said quite a bit. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions? How is this working? How are you feeling with string concatenation versus string interpolation? Does that make sense? Just put a 1 in the chat if this is all making sense, put a 0 if it does not. If you have questions, obviously, feel free to come off mute.
So how do you know you have to write the F string? Like, is that just something that we know versus another letter, I guess?
Yeah, so it's always F. So anytime we're wanting to write a string, great question. Anytime we're wanting to write a string and we want to inject a variable into it, right? I have some value that I want to put in my string, whether it's a variable or something we get from the database. We're going to want to put an F string. At least if we're wanting just to print it, right? It's always F. That is never another letter. F is the key word for Python. Once Python reads this F right here, a lowercase f, once it reads that, it knows, oh, they want to do some string interpolation. I should be prepared to inject a variable in this way. So you cannot put you can't put like a C or a M, nothing here. It's only F. Only F. Great question. Does that make sense? And it's anytime, we want to write a string where we add in some variables. If we didn't want to, if we just wanted to have a string that just says, hello world, we don't need an F string. There's no need. It's only when within our string, we want to add in some variables. That's when we do an F string. And then after that, whenever we want to call the variable, we just do our curly brackets. Cool. Any other questions?
So for the F string, I'm glad you explained that, because for the longest, like, F strings used to confuse me. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I used to see the F and be like, what is that? But so basically, so for the F string, it's just combining different data types.
Yeah. So if you want, let me backtrack. F strings are only a thing when you want to write a string, right? So when you want to write a string, F strings are the only thing, that's the only time you want to use an F string. And the reason we use it is when we want to add in a variable within my string. So even if this wasn't here, like let's say that for right now, I just did this. These are two of the, they're still the same data type, right? So it's okay. I can either do string concatenation, or if I want to, again, what's the format of my string? If I want to do I want to add something to it, instead of having to do something like this, where I have to do spaces and add this other string and then add this and add this other string, right? That's kind of a pain, where really it just allows us to format exactly how we want, but we say, I want you to write this sentence, but here I want you to put this number that I told you to remember a long time ago. And here I want you to put this name that I want you to, that I wrote a long time ago. So an F string is only when we want to inject variables within my string. We can add data types, or we can kind of, like, I could just, in the same way that I dealt with this, I could say something like, some number string equals 5, right? And I can still do, if I wanted to, and I just want to be able to show you that you could do this, I could say another combo, or let's say, yeah, is I can do some int, which we know is 5, plus, and I can typecast, this is just, I don't need an F string to do this. I can type this number because we know that 5 is a number, right? I can convert that to an integer, and then I can print that, and that's fine. So I just really wanted to, let me clear this out. Really wanted to reiterate that you do not have to do an F string if you want to combine two different data types. We can do that without an F string. It's only when we have a string that we're wanting to write, and that string is going to have a variable in it, that's when we use an F string.
Okay.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, nah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So if I were to come up here, we get 10, right? Because what if I said 5.7? It doesn't work because that's a float. So I think I could say float. So I typecast it to a float versus that. And I get 10.7. Right? Now, one thing I want to note is even if I put float or I put int, but let's say that this said pizza. Python's going to try to do that, but there's no number that is pizza, right?
Right.
So if I clear, so we can see the error. It's going to give me, hey, could not convert string to float pizza. It's saying, okay, I took away these guys, which is kind of what we do for a number, but pizza doesn't make any sense. That's not a number, right? If I have it 5, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's now a number. Or 5.9. Okay, great. That's why when we have numbers that are strings, we can convert them in this way, or we have float or int if we wanted to do an int. But if our string is just a random word, it's going to give us an error just like this. It's going to try, Python's going to try to convert it, but it's going to say, I don't know what that means. I don't know what pizza is as a number. That doesn't have a value in my numerical class. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. Cool. Okay. Well, I wanted to go over, we need to go over some lists and for loops and conditional statements, but I think we're going to save that for Thursday. So we'll do a little algorithm on Thursday, and then I'll go over that on Thursday. I don't want to overwhelm you guys for the first class for sure. But did any of this, are there any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, or did this make sense as your first introduction? Any questions? Or?
No questions. I just wanted to, I'm just writing my notes. So with the F string, you said it was to inject variables and to kind of combine strings and numbers, kind of. Correct?
So you can, it's a way that you, if you want to have a string with a number like variable in it, an F string will allow that. Again, right here, we're just doing 2 strings. So it's not just for that. It's only when we want to inject our string right here with some variable numbers or variables. Not a number, just any sort of variable we have. These are 2 strings. But instead of me doing something like this and doing string concatenation, it's a lot easier to write this. Because all you have to do is put an F and then you just write it like you normally would, right? Okay, Will says space hello world exclamation point is a lot easier than some string plus space plus, or some other string plus space plus some string plus exclamation point. You know, like it just kind of becomes a lot versus this. It's just,
got it.
you write it like normal. You just want to put a variable somewhere.
Okay. Just wanted to get clarification as I was writing my notes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Any other questions? These are great questions. Any other questions, friends?
Yes, one more question, please. So when it comes to a class, can we say like a class is like a blueprint.
Mhm. That's exactly what it is. That's gonna be the word I use when we talk about classes. So great job, Jeffrey.
Oh, I was okay.
Yeah, it's just a blueprint to lay out what it's gonna look like.
Oh, nice. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Great idea. Great word. Any other questions, my friends?
So you know how you put, I guess like 5.9, like a number as a string. You said that would be an error as well, right? That would be an error, like the pizza thing.
So if I am typecast, so let's do this. If I am doing this, it's gonna get me an error, right? And then you can even see that my Sonar lint, this is my Pylance, right, is saying fix this invalid operator. You're basically what it's trying to, between two incompatible types, int and string, saying you're trying to add a string and an int together. Those don't work, right? So if I were to do this and go to my terminal, now we're to say, híjole, Python 3, class 1. You get this, unsupported operand types for plus int and string, right? And so it's saying, hey, I cannot add an integer to a string. Those two don't work. Now, what I can do, if I want that to happen, if I see that my string has what I would know as a numerical value, again, if it said pizza, it's not going to work. Python's got to basically be, you can think about it this way, Python has to be able to take off the quotation marks and it still makes sense as a number. So if I said pizza, if I said unicorn or cupcake, it's not, there's no number called unicorn or cupcake, right? There is, if I were to say, 5.9, you're going to say, oh, that's a number, or that's a float in this case. And so the way I can do that is, because I know that this is a float, I can typecast this and say, I want you to interpret that as a float. And so when it comes here, it's not going to change the overall value. But when it's creating this value of another combo, it's going to take some int, which is our 5. And it's going to say plus the float version, i.e., I want you to remove the quotation marks of some number string. So it's going to go like this. So now it's going to say something like, 5 plus 5.9. That's because I typecast this to a float. Now, if I were to still say print type, not another combo, sorry, of some number string, because remember, it doesn't change this value, it just right here, it changes how it interprets that value. So here I'm going to be okay, right? Because another combo is 5 plus, because we changed it to float, 5.9. But on the next line, if I were to say, give me the type of this value here, because it doesn't change the original value, it's going to say that this is still a string. Let's type clear. See, I get 10.9 because that is 5 plus 5.9. So I'm printing that. But the original value here is still of type string. We just said, hey, for this instance, real quick, when we're creating this variable, let's just pretend this is a float. It says, all right, bet. And it changes that.
Okay, I see. Okay, so when you do that, like when you said it's called like typecast, when you type, you typecast. Okay, I see. Okay, I see. So basically, it's like it's just like that's a converter, but it's still going to be a string in the terminal.
Yep. It's still going to be a string in your code, right? It's just saying, for real quick, let's just pretend that this is a float. And it's going to go and be like, well, does that make sense? And again, you can think about it. It's going to go like this. Does this make sense to be a float? Does, right? Because it's 5.9. Again, if this was unicorn, and I like to use unicorn, I use unicorn a lot just because I feel like it's outrageous. So, kind of makes the point. If I were to say, okay, let's pretend that this is a number or a float. and I go here. Does that make sense for a number? No,
Not
it
at
doesn't,
all.
right? So it's gonna say, well, I don't know what the heck unicorn means. I don't know what kind of language you're speaking. And so that's where it pretends, it says, okay, yeah, well, I'll play pretend 5.9, but I'm not gonna change the value. I'm just gonna pretend for your sake real quick. Okay, great, that's fine. So we get this 10.9. But it's still at its roots, still a string.
Okay. Okay.
Make a little bit more
I-
sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Perfect.
Yeah. So when you convert it, it still has to be like, it still has to make sense, or it's not gonna work. Okay, I see what you're saying. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions? These are all wonderful questions, friends. Great first class, great questions. Any other questions?
I have a question, Will.
Yeah.
So do we get to see the recorded video? I mean,
Mhm.
like after once we're done, or
Nope. So what'll happen is, great question, Jeffrey, is I will stop the recording as soon as it's done. It's got to download. Give me about 45 minutes. Cause the
Yeah.
download and I got to put it up to YouTube. And then there's two places you can find it. I
yes,
will put it
please.
here. And if we do anything within office hour that is recording purposeful, if somebody asks a good question, I'll record it. So I'll put that here. But I will put the lecture link right here to the YouTube. Also within our course, you can go over to lectures, lecture videos, and then you'll see session 1 is right here. So I'll put it in both places. So you have two places you can find it.
Oh, awesome.
So class calendar and then session 1. So I'll make sure that you guys get that pretty immediately.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. You guys are asking wonderful questions. Any other questions?
I think I have one more other question related to like submitting the assignment.
Uh-huh.
When is the last day to submit the assignment?
Great question. That is going to be Sunday. Everything is due on Sunday. So both your discussion questions for that week or discussion question for that week, and then your core assignments. Again, core assignments, if you're really falling behind, just more of a let me know. And I can let Clayton know. You still can't just follow. That doesn't mean you can't just not do it and just let me know, because there's still, you have to keep up with the class.
Yeah.
Discussion questions, though, I have no pool. I can't do anything for you if you miss it. So just make sure. I think I've already checked the first 4 for this week. I already checked the first 4 weeks. Just go knock those out. It takes 5 minutes. They're not big questions. It's it's not really, what are some key differences, Python and JavaScript? We just talked a lot about that, right? One uses var, one doesn't use var. One last thing I do want to say, sorry, is within Python, we don't have, like I said, we don't have let or const. And so really there's just one way to declare a variable. Now, what you might see sometimes is something like this. If you see something in the wild that is all caps, that is what a developer is trying to communicate. This should be a constant variable that should not change. So all caps typically means, now it still operates the same. Python doesn't read it in any other way. But if you see something as some constant, or, not some constant, but if you see something that's all caps, that's usually a developer trying to say, hey, this shouldn't change, because there is no way to have like a constant variable and immutable or mutable, because there's no way to differentiate between that. You might see that somewhere. Yeah, just want to let you guys have a heads up there. Cool. Okay, friends, we are 13 minutes over. These are great questions though. Any other questions? I try to be a good steward of your time. But you guys are asking wonderful questions.
Oh, so
No, but sorry, I was gonna say no, but thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
thank
Yeah,
you. Will.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this next 16 weeks with you guys. If you guys have any questions, again, feel free to email me. We're going to talk about lists. It's a great one to come to. So make sure you do for loops, lists, and conditional statements. Sorry, brain freeze, brain fog. Conditional statements on Thursday, and we're going to do a little algorithm. So it'll be a more packed day, but it'll be fun. So if you guys can't make it at 4:30, just shoot me an email, and I can kind of adjust. And then last thing I'll say is I try to use, like, especially as we get into it, I'll use visualizations. If there's anything I can do to help you learn better, if there's any sort of tools I can do, closed captioning, I think is something that I can turn on. If you guys need, if you're hard of, anything, please just feel free to reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I will try to adjust. Can't guarantee that I'll totally adjust everything to fit your needs, because there's other students who might need other things, but I will do everything I can to fit your learning needs. So other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and we will see you Thursday.
See you Thursday. Everybody have a blessed one. Nice to meet
Have a
everybody.
good one.
too.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
Good
guys.
night.
Bye-bye.